Hello, Tom Cosm here. This is video 1 of 3 videos I'm going to make on how to program your own drum loops and drum beats, so broken beats and that kind of stuff. The first video I'm going to be focusing just on audio tracks. The second video will be using a bunch of MIDI tracks, so multiple MIDI tracks, and the final video we'll be talking with just one MIDI track. So as we're just using audio tracks, I'm going to delete these 2 MIDI tracks here, which Ableton Live has kindly given us by default, and we're left with 2 audio tracks. I'm also going to go into arrangement view by hitting the tab key, or if you're completely new, up here you can switch between session and arrangement view. So we want arrangement view because we've got this nice timeline to work in. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to drag my loop points to a 4-bar loop. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 up here, and we'll just stick with these 2 audio tracks for now. Now the samples I'm going to be using, the drum individual hits, so the kicks and snares and whatever, these are samples that I have made myself, and it's a pack downloadable on my website, www.cosm.co.nz for pro members. This is the Xmas special drum pack, so these are free to use how you like, and I've just got a bunch of kicks and snares and hats and percussion and whatnot. So first thing I'm going to do is find the kick drum that I like. It's always a good place to start with a kick drum. Gives you a nice slow, low foundation, a nice solid steady beat. So let's have a quick flick through our kicks here. I'm going to start with a bit of a kind of a glitch hoppy broken beat thing here. If they're not playing when you click on them, make sure you have your headphone little icon here, the preview button, enabled. So let me find a good chunky one. Let's go with that one, number 10. Now I'm just going to drag this in to the audio track. See how it snaps to any of these beats that I want the kick to be on? I can just drag it anywhere here. I'm going to drag it to the very start. I'm going to zoom in a bit, and we'll rename the track with Command or Control R to kick. Very easy. Now this particular style, I see a lot of people who use broken beats in their music use this style because it gives you a lot of control over the individual sample itself rather than having a MIDI clip actually play an instrument or a sampler. So let's just play that from the start, spacebar. Not too bad. Now a good thing to do just to start off with, if you're really new and you want to kind of get some foundations, is to select that area and hit duplicate. So I'm going to do that 3 times. Just be careful if you just select the clip and duplicate it, and you'll notice how it doesn't duplicate the actual time frame you selected. It just duplicates the time of the clip. So that'll start getting out of beat. If I turn on the metronome, you hear how the kicks are too soon. So we're just going to Control Z to get back. Make sure you select the area and the space after it. So this is the blank space that doesn't actually play anything. Then hit duplicate. Now we get to the metronome on. Awesome. So we don't really want a 4/4 track, but it's good to start with a 4/4 kick drums, I find. So now I've done the same as when I duplicated before, but I'm going to select all 4 of them and I'm going to duplicate them like that. But for now, let's drag the end of the loop marker all the way back, so we just have 1 bar here. So 1 to 2 just means 1 bar. We can zoom in, we can hit loop up here, so now this area will be continuously looped and we can play it. Turn the metronome off. Excellent. So we've got a kick thing going on. I'm going to change this BPM down to, let's say, 110. It seems to be a pretty popular choice at the moment. Great. Now we need to find a snare. I like adding snares in next. They're always good. So let's have a listen to these. Let's go with number 4. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the number 4 snare on the 1.2 beat. And I'm going to copy this across by holding down the Option key and dragging it to the 1.4 beat of the bar. So this means that every second and every 4th beat of the bar we get a snare. So it kind of sounds like a slow 4 to the 4 tune right now, but 4 to the floor, but we don't want that. So what I can do is I can just delete these kicks here, and then they just kind of alternate on each beat. Starting to get there, but we want a broken beat feeling. So what we need to do is experiment with these kicks and put them in different places around the snare. The snare is kind of the release part, and the kicks are kind of the tension. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can select the area of a kick, you can copy it, and you can click where you want it and paste it like that. Or you can, as I did before, hold on the Option key and drag an area of it like that. Or we can just click and move this one back a bit. I'm going to duplicate this. That's another way. So that's sounding a bit more like a broken beat. You can experiment and put these anywhere. I'm going to copy this little part and throw it here for fun. Now that's all good, but one thing we want to do is we want to be able to control the volume of some of these. Maybe not so much with the kick and the snare, but when we're working in this way, we want to be able to control the volume of each individual hit. Now, some people use the volume over here, so that you can use this to change the volume of a track. But that's not very good, because at the end, when you're ready to try and mix down the actual loop that you've created, you can't do that because you've automated this. So I mean, you could go, for instance, you could go get into the pencil tool here, and we could click points like this, and this would change the volume of each one of these individual hits. But that means that we can no longer use this. You see how these go grey, and it means that these are no longer active because we've modified this manually. So I don't want to use that technique. I'm going to go Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, so that's back at 0. What we can do is each individual clip actually has an amplitude or a volume slider here. So for example, I'm just going to change the volume of these two kicks here. Let's bring this down. You'll notice the waveform up here on the kick, it gets smaller and smaller. It also does it here. So I can bring the volume down of the kick here, and I'm going to make that one about halfway in between the full volume kick and the low volume kick, which should give it a nice little dunk. So it kind of adds a bit more of a human feeling to it that way. Another way you can do this, which I've seen people do, I don't do it personally all the time, but what you can do is you can use something called consolidate. Now, consolidate is in the edit menu, or it's command or Control J. So by doing that, it takes these two and it turns it into one clip for us. So if we zoom in down here on the waveform view, you can actually see we now have one audio clip which has two kicks in it. And from there we can go into the envelopes area. So if you don't have it open, it's the little E down the bottom, and we can go clip, make sure it's on volume, and then we can click and drag points like this. So this will automate the volume for us, like so. So that's another way of doing it. I'm just going to go back to how I did it before, because that's how I'm used to. Excuse me. So we're going to bring the volume of this one down. Not bad, and we should name this the snare to keep things nice and neat. Excellent. Now the next thing we need to do is I want to add in some hi-hats. So I'm going to create an audio track like before, and let's go into our hi-hats thing. Let's just find a simple closed hat. That one sounds good. Now, just like before, I'm going to start by adding in one at the very first beat of the first bar, and I'm going to duplicate this across to each beat of the bar. Remember, I hold down Option key to duplicate that. So hi-hats are really good. They're a nice high thing. They're kind of a reference thing. I like to think of them as the thing that gels the kick and the snare together. The kick's kind of the tension, the snare releases it, and the hi-hats kind of keep things moving along, so you've got something to reference these two things as they kind of work side by side together. Now what we can do now is we can select all of these. We don't have to worry about the timing here. Just make sure you've got them all highlighted, and again hold down the Option key and duplicate these across once more. So this gives it double time. Very good. Now, another thing we can do once, as I said before, is we can take these and bring the volume down on some of them. So it gives a little bit of a human element to it, I find, rather than just having this computerized single sound playing over and over. So I've made a small one here, and I'm going to duplicate the small one across. So every second one of these is a little bit quiet. And what we can also do is we can select this and we can duplicate it to give it full times, or a double time again, to give it another little fill, kind of like we did over here. And let's put another one here, but let's do it again even, so that's double time as well. And I'll use that trick I did before just for reference. Control J to consolidate, open it up, zoom in, make sure we're in envelopes, so click on the header to make sure this arrow is active, and we click here and we click here and we drag the point down. Maybe not to the absolute bottom, because then it won't play at all. I reckon these should go here. Maybe not. We could put another one here. So that's sounding pretty cool, but we've only got one individual hi-hat sound here. Just name this the hat 1. Let's create another audio track. So the shortcut is Command or Control T. And we should call this hat 2, shouldn't we? Now I'm just going to pick another hat here, just for a little bit of variation every now and then. We could just throw it in anywhere. Let's have a look. It's a little bit loud, let's bring it down. Awesome, I'm going to click on this and just duplicate it and rename this to hat 3. Just a quick way of getting a new audio track. I'm just picking individual kind of hat sounds here that would do well as a little kind of a breakup. That could be cool. Maybe put that here. Not bad. Now when we're happy with this, we can select the bottom rightmost area of the loop, drag up to the top rightmost, which is the kick, and we can just duplicate that. But what will happen is, because we've already got kicks here, it's going to fill in the gaps for us with the original kicks that were in that place. So I don't want that, so I'm going to select these kicks and delete them before I duplicate. So select it all, duplicate, so now we have a 2-bar loop. And that means we can add a bit of variation into the second bar just so it's not so repetitive. So once again, I'm going to duplicate this. How did I get hat 2, 3, hat 3, and we'll call this hat, have a guess, 4, and we get rid of these because we don't want these. It's quite cool. Now, a cool thing about working with the sample mode, which is quite hard to do with the other modes, which we'll get into later, is you can select an area or a clip. I'm going to delete this that tail part there. You can select it and you can click this reverse button down the bottom. So with a hi-hat, that creates a nice little kind of white noise build-up, which can be quite fun. So hopefully this will sound cool. It's all nice, but you see how we've got that kind of suck now. That's another kind of tension thing. So I find with these kind of tension things, you need to release immediately after or just a few beats after to kind of give them some resolution. So one way to do this is we could add some really fast little close hi-hats here. You'll notice as I zoom in, we get more and more lines to work with. If you don't want to zoom in, but you want more lines, you can use Command 1 to... well, it's not going to give me any smaller than that, but you can use Command 1 or Command 2 to go bigger. So 1 to go smaller, 2 to go bigger. So I want to go really fast here. So let's have it at there, and I'm going to duplicate that 4 times. And let's duplicate that so we've got, what is that, 8 really, really crazy ones. Now with this particular one, I would use that consolidate thing because it gives us one audio clip, as I said before, just because I want to adjust the volume of all of those at once. So I want it to start nice and high, go down to about midway, and then come back up again. And remember, and now we have curves. So if I hold down the Option key, I can actually curve these a little bit, which is cool because I want that last one to kind of suck up a bit. Something else needs to happen there, but what we can do is we can move on now to let's add some percussion. So where are we here? What do we got in percussion? So in this pack we've got a few bongos. We'll use those in a minute, but we've got some toms, we've got some digital kind of sounding one. Maybe that one. So I'm going to add that tom in where I said that kind of reversed hi-hat builds up to, because that could give it a bit of a pow. Maybe I need to move this back one and this back one. I'm just experimenting around trying to find where the kind of groove is. We can also repitch these, so that kind of sounds what I want, but this tom is a bit too low. So by using this transpose, we can bring it up some semitones. You'll notice because this clip isn't warped, that as I move it up, it shortens the clip. That's because as you increase the peak, you need to squish the waveform up. And it'd be quite cool if there were two of those, I think. And this one pitched down a bit. Very good. So we'll name this Tom 1. I'm Tom 1. Next track, I want to add a little fill. So we'll call this Tom Fill. So these toms here, I listened, they were pretty cool. So we can just throw these in at the end of the bar. So again, this is a tension release thing, but this is on the scale of these two bars rather than individual beats that are within the bar. So I've just chucked down 3 toms here, these ones. That's a pretty simple little kind of fill thing. And let's add one more here and put a crash at the start, because a crash is always a good release for a little fill at the end of a bar. It's a nice lush one. Let's bring the volume down here. So that feels a bit too boring. Now we can take these snares here and throw another one here and bring the volume down. That kind of gives that ghost snare kind of sound. Maybe put it here. Maybe if we had 4 snares at the end in this bar here, it would kind of complement those toms. And we want to make some of these lower. We can do the trick that we did with the hi-hat before by reversing it. So I could take this part of the snare here, duplicate it, and then reverse it. It's not really, you can't really notice it. So let's drag this out a bit and see how that sounds. Very good. Now maybe I can change the pitch of that one. So it kind of, snares do have a particular pitch. Most people consider them to be not very tonal, but they do have a pitch. So if I was to change the pitch of this one, it does kind of give it a feeling of separate, being separate than these ones. But what we need to do is we need to warp it first. So if I just change the pitch while it's unwarped, it'll stretch out or squish together, like I showed you before. But if we warp it, it'll let us change the pitch without stretching it. And we also need to choose a different algorithm than Beats. Beats is used for stretching out actual drum loops and things that have quite a lot of drums in them. We want this to be something different. Let's just try tones. I don't like that snare there, so let's go back into our snares. We'll add another snare track here. We'll call this ghost snares. Usually what people call them. They're kind of like little snares, kind of rim shots, I guess, if you want to think of an actual drum kit. Could be a good one. Put some here. Not sounding too bad. Now, one other thing we can do here is with these ghost snares, I'm going to add an audio effect. I'm going to add an EQ because I'm going to take away a lot of the mid and just kind of have the highs left of the snares, just to give it a more of a kind of a tap-tappy feeling rather than a feeling rather than a something with a bit of substance. So I'm going to take the first pole of this EQ8 here and turn it into this shelf so it takes away anything that comes below this particular area in the spectrum. And we can give it some resonance by moving it up and down to give it a bit more emphasis on the point that we have it cut off. And I guess that brings up another cool topic, is that by using this way of dragging audio samples in, we can put individual effects on each individual element that is within this drum loop that we're creating on the actual track. So it makes it quite easy for workflow. For example, I could add a reverb on the snare, bring the size right down, the decay time down to make it kind of nice and tight. Bring the dry wet down, which of course means how much of the reverb is actually applied or played out. And this is also great too because you can use the panning here, so we can move the panning around. It's probably wise to move the panning around on these kind of little hat hits that we have going on here, just a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. This gives it a little bit of space. Let's grab this tom and add it here and here. Maybe even a couple more. I'm just using the duplicate here, which is the option key. And remember before we can transpose this, so maybe we can make this higher, so it kind of gives us another tom to work with. So that one is way too loud, so we can use just the level of the channel here because there's only one there. So I'm going to use that as a example. Actually, let's add some bongos really quick. Actually, no, we won't. I'll use that for the third tutorial video. So what was this? This was the crash. So there's all our audio tracks. Now, what I usually do is select the bottom one, drag up to the top, or vice versa, hold down the shift key, click. Now we've selected all the tracks. We can go right, click, and we can group those together. So now it's given us this group where all of these tracks are. We can close it down, minimize it, we can expand it. This is good because now we can place effects on everything in here as a whole. So Ableton released the glue compressor with 9, I believe, which is a neat compressor which kind of brings lots of elements together, so they kind of sound like they're glued together if you want. It's quite good for drums, so I've just double clicked that, or you can just drag it down here and let's have a listen. I'm going to bring the volume down here because we're peaking on the master. So let's bring the threshold down on this. Bring up the makeup, give it some more volume. I reckon the kick's too loud, so I'm going to bring this down a bit. This is just kind of a really rough mix. Now, I don't think that snare has enough punch, so what we could do is add another audio track within the group, and I'm going to call this snare punch. And what we can do here is we can use kick drums to complement the snare drums, but pitch them up to give them a snap. So let's go back to, oops, where were we here? In our kicks. That's a good one. So there's not much kind of atmosphere going on with this one, but it's got a nice kind of ticky punch to it, which is what we want. So I'm going to drag those in underneath the snare. I'm just going to solo it, and I'm going to hold down the command key so I can solo both of them. And let's just have a listen. See how now, just with that snare, it's got a bit of a punch, but it doesn't have too much. Let's put the kick in. But the kick is too low. We don't want it to be that low. So if I transpose this up, not bad, and I need to bring the level down a bit. That could be good. So let's take this kick. I'm going to copy and paste it wherever the snare is. We will forget about these little ones here. And solo off. Let's listen. I don't think it's high enough, so let's bring it up. And another thing we should do is you should get rid of the tail of the kick. So a cool thing you can do in audio with audio clips is you can push Command Option F, and it gives you the fades. And this means we can click on these little things here and we can fade it in or fade it out. So we can fade this out, and as I close the clip down, make it smaller, you'll notice the fade is correlating to how long the clip is. So we just want that kind of snap there. So that's good. We can get rid of these kicks. Copy that, paste, paste, paste. those toms aren't really standing up for me, so what I'm going to do is on this audio track we're going to add a filter delay, which is usually used for having a delay on both the left, the right, and the left and right, or mid. I use this in an interesting way. I turn the mid off, and then I turn the synced time on both, so the delay time is really short milliseconds, and then I make them both 1 millisecond, but then I slowly bring one up to say 6 or 7. What that does is it creates a weird spatial effect, which kind of really opens things up. Also make sure that the volume of each side is on 0, because by default one's on +4, one's on +6. And you can also bring the dry completely down, so this is the original signal, depending on how you like it. So let's have a listen to it now. That doesn't sound very good there. And we don't just have to restrict ourselves with these toms to being in the standard kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 syntax or timing, if you like. If we hit Command 3, the grid will move to a triplet type mode. So remember before, number 2 would expand the grid points for us, number 1 would make them smaller. We can use 3 to go into this kind of triplet mode. So by putting these on the lines now, we're going to get a triplet feeling roll. Let's make this lower. Probably have to do the same with the snares as well. So check this out here. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I'm dragging on, but with the actual construction of the drums. But I'm going to show you the final trick, which is kind of important, which is naming the group. No, I'm kidding. We need to give this some groove. Well, we don't have to. It's sounding pretty good by itself, but we don't have any groove. So groove is when you take usually the second and the fourth beats of everything that's currently playing and move them slightly to the right or slightly delayed in time to give it that shuffle effect, so that, instead of which sounds like a computer, which we don't want. Now, we can do this with actual audio, which is cool in Ableton Live. It's usually quite easy to do in MIDI, but we can do this in audio as well. So I've created this drum group here. I'm going to create a new audio track. We'll call this de-resampled. Put the drop down menu here. We need to open our ins and outs, which is this little I/O button down here in the bottom right. And this lets us specify where the audio comes from and where the audio goes to in individual audio tracks. And I want to pick the input as that group that I call drum. So now the input of this audio track is coming from all of those audio clips grouped together in one drum track. And this is great because now I can hit record here, I can go back to the start, I can hit record on the master, and it will re-record the entire loop for us. So let's have a listen. Very good. I just hit spacebar to stop. You'll see how it started recording it again because it's in a loop. We can get rid of that quickly by just undoing it. So Command or Control Z. So that's cool. So now I have my drum loop. So I can mute this here. Excellent. We can go in here, turn it into a loop, and we can drag it out like so. And this will continue on for the duration of our tune. But what I want to do is add some groove to it. So over in our packs over here, you'll notice that we have a core library, and in there we have swing and grooves. Now these are interesting little information files that can be dragged on top of original audio loops or MIDI loops within Ableton Live to give them a bit of character, to give them a swing, to give them a groove. And it does this with audio in a really interesting way. I'll get into how it does it with MIDI in the next videos, but this does it in a really interesting way. What it does is it goes through the sample and it finds each individual transient or each kind of spike in audio. So you see these little gray markers here. This is where Ableton Live has detected that there is an individual hit. So this might be a snare, this might be a hi-hat, and so on. Because we worked by dragging audio samples into a perfectly 4/4/4 grid, you'll notice that all of these are exactly on the right places. But what the groove thing does is it finds these transients and it moves the audio whilst preserving the actual clip, or what is playing in the clip. So it moves them slightly, which is quite clever when you think about it. And you've got a bunch of grooves to choose from here. The very standard one is under swing. We want swing 16 because we're working with swing 16th notes here. So this is 16 notes per bar. Ticka, 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 ticka. You might have heard just when I clicked on one, it gave me a previews, which is kind of cool. So I can click on this. So here how that's kind of swung. You'll notice it's 16-05, 16-15. The last two numbers kind of say how strong the swing is going to be. So this one would be crazy. So let's try swing 35. So I can just click on this and drag it over the top of the audio clip. Now, nothing's changed, but it does sound different. So let's have a listen. So you can hear that difference. You'll also notice that it's added this swing 16-35 to the groove pool down here. Now the groove pool is where all the swings, all the grooves that you have within your project are currently based, and it gives you a few options here. I'm not going to go through all these. I think I've done a video on what all these do, but the one important one is timing. So timing for this particular thing is pretty much how much of this groove is applied. So let's add a really strong groove here. So this is 18. If I bring the timing down to 0, we're back to the original. And as I bring it up, you'll hear that groove starting to kick in. I guess the other one I should quickly mention is quantize. It's not relevant to this loop that we're working in because I put everything aligned with the grid. But if you do have a live drum loop which does already have some groove to it and you want to apply another groove to it, by bringing up the quantize, it takes the transients that are not aligned with the grid. So let's say that this is over here or it's over here. It will go through and it will snap these back to the grid and then start applying the new groove. So you can actually completely change the groove. You could take the funky drummer loop and then you could apply the groove of that to the end break, for an example, which is quite clever, I think. It's not always perfect, but it's quite clever. So now we've got this groove going on. There's one other thing we need to think about, and that is when we're actually moving these individual transients, even though you can't see them here, you can hear them. When these are getting moved, it's kind of squishing and expanding certain areas of the loop. And something has to happen for that to work. And there needs to be a way that you can squish something down or expand something whilst preserving the audio. So we have the different warping algorithms down here, which you may be familiar with. There's a bunch of different ones. Beats, tones, textures, and whatever. I think we went through one when I was changing the pitch of a sample. This is an instance where we do want to use beats mode. So by using beats mode, it understands that this is something that has individual beats, individual drum hits and loops. So it tries to preserve that as much as possible, and it does that. And you can choose to do it in a few different ways. Transients. In this drop-down menu, this is the one you want. This will make sure it stretches things whenever it finds a transient. So it'll wait until there's a hi-hat or it'll wait until there's a snare before it starts making the change. You can specify a certain amount, so 16th notes would probably work in this case as well, but we're going to go with transients. This little drop-down menu says what happens if the sample has to be squished so much that there will be leftover empty space. So at the moment it's got this forward arrow and this back arrow. This means that when the sample has played completely, so let's say this transient here has to get squished down to say this amount here, it's saying what do you want to happen here? Well, this forward and backwards thing will say start playing the sample backwards for 1/4 of what the sample would be doing. So it would squish it down and then it would play this, but in reverse. And because it does that, both points of the waveform, when they meet up, they're both at a zero crossing, and it creates a pretty seamless way of extending a sample. You can kind of hear it happening in this loop that we're playing. There's a few things that sound a bit reversed. you might be able to, if you're astute, you might be able to pick up that you can hear a bit of reversing going on. There's a couple of other modes here. We can use this one here, which simply stops the sample and has silence. I personally like this one, so let's listen to how this works. Or we can use this one here, which will start replaying the sample, which can get a bit messy. If I put it on this one again, that actually stops the kind of pseudo sample, I guess, if you like, and change the tempo, you can probably hear it quite a lot. So Ableton Live has cleverly figured out where each individual element is within this drum loop. Excellent. So finally, I'm just going to add in a bass loop here, just so we can hear it with a bass line for our glitchy thingy magic. Let's just duplicate this one and have the fill at the end. Excellent, so that is video number 1, how to make drum loops using audio tracks. There's a lot of other things you can do with the audio editing, quick stuttering and reversing, but I'm going to leave it there for now. Cheers, Tom Cosm.